Today on Talk Fulton, educating voters on what is on the ballot, from the transportation referendum to the human trafficking amendment. What do they really mean as voter education outreach is down to the wire? I'm Shania Chavis. We'll talk about these topics and more. Talk Fulton starts right now. Welcome to the show, everybody. With just days to go before the November 8th election, many voters are still trying to educate themselves on not only the candidates running for office, but also on the proposed amendments and referendums now on the ballot. And there are a few that have garnered quite a bit of attention. For instance, Amendment 1, which asks, shall the Constitution of Georgia be amended to allow the state to intervene in chronically failing public schools in order to improve student performance? Amendment 2 authorizes penalties for sexual exploitation and assessments on adult entertainment to fund child victims services. Then, of course, there is the question about the creation of the city of South Fulton. And we can't leave off the transportation-related items, including T-Splost and the MARTA referendum. So by now, you have likely heard about the T-Splost, but may still have a few questions. So in an effort to educate voters about the topic, we put together a 2-minute video that gives the nuts and bolts of the referendum. Take a look.
Transportation is an issue affecting everyone who lives and works in Fulton County. Residents identify traffic as the single most important issue facing the Metro Atlanta region. On November 8th, 2016, residents in North and South Fulton will vote on a special purpose local option sales tax for transportation, known as T-Splost. If approved, revenue from a 0.75 cents sales tax would go toward transportation projects for a total of around $570 million. Funding from T-Splost will be divided among the cities and unincorporated Fulton based on population. Each city has chosen projects important to residents in that community, and funding will go directly to each city so they can manage their own projects. These projects include things like roads, bridges, sidewalks, and traffic signals, and bike paths. Voters inside the city of Atlanta will have the chance to consider two different sales tax. One would be 0.5 cents and would be designated for MARTA and transit in general, and the other 0.4 cent sales tax would be allocated for other transportation improvement projects. If both are approved, a total of 0.9 cents on every dollar spent will go to transportation efforts in the city of Atlanta. Fulton County and all 14 cities in Fulton County worked together to bring these initiatives to voters. While many Metro Atlanta counties already have a Splost for transportation and infrastructure, this is the first time that Fulton County will have a vote on T-Splost. You can learn more information about T-Splost and the projects in your community online at fultoncountyga.gov/T-Splost.
So as the video mentions, voters inside the city of Atlanta will have the chance to consider a 0.5 cent tax, which would be designated for MARTA and transit in general. But what does that really mean? Here to answer that question is the man that has been charged with educating voters on the MARTA referendum, Fred Hicks. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here today.
So we've seen the signs along the road about the MARTA referendum, but many are still not clear on how this will impact them and the system. So walk us through it. What is the difference between what voters in Fulton County outside the city of Atlanta will see on their ballot versus voters in the city of Atlanta? What will they see?
Absolutely. Great question, Shania. You know, one of the big things about this is that everyone in Fulton County will vote on something as it relates to transportation and infrastructure this year on November 8th. The difference is that if you live in the city of Atlanta and are registered to vote in the city of Atlanta, then you will have on your ballot, at the very end of your ballot, a question for a 0.4% sales tax for infrastructure, and the one that I'm here to talk about today, half a penny or 0.5% sales tax for the expansion and enhancement of MARTA. If you live outside of the city of Atlanta, you'll have a different item on your ballot.
Sorry to interrupt, Fred, and you mentioned MARTA, so let's talk about that. What is the MARTA question?
Absolutely. So on your ballot, you're going to see a question that reads, shall the city of Atlanta basically have the ability to levy a half-penny sales tax for the expansion and enhancement of MARTA inside the city of Atlanta?
I got you. And so tell us, kind of give us the backstory. How did we get here, and what legislation authorized these questions even being on the ballot?
Absolutely, Shania. Anyone who moves through Fulton County knows that moving through Fulton County can be really difficult at any point in the day. So back in this past legislative session, SB 369 was passed, which allowed for the city of Atlanta to levy a half-penny sales tax for MARTA and the rest of the county to levy, as the video mentioned, a 0.75% sales tax for transportation projects, assuming that the voters support it.
And let's talk about the voters. Has the public had an opportunity to provide input?
Absolutely. One of the things that we're doing here at MARTA is we're making a great effort to be extremely transparent and involved and engaged in the community. To date, we've conducted over 50 public information sessions across the city and are continuing to do so to make sure that if someone wants information about this vote and about the implications of the half-penny, that they certainly will have access to that information. We've even created a website, and we have a strong social media presence, again, to reach people where they are.
And what does MARTA hope to achieve, Fred, with this particular referendum?
Absolutely. Shania, right now, MARTA is in great financial position to continue doing what it's doing. But if we're going to have more MARTA and more places and reduce wait times and really connect the city, then MARTA needs this revenue source to do that. And so if the voters give MARTA this, then that's what we're going to do. We're going to work immediately on connecting the city, reducing wait times, and expanding our services across the city of Atlanta, while taking great care to enhance the existing services that we already have. So like increasing wheelchair accessibility, opening up during off-peak hours, cleaner bathrooms, things like that.
And how does MARTA, would you say, compare with other systems around the country?
Again, another great question. Over the last 16 years across the country, about 16 different cities have invested in transit: Dallas, Denver, Minneapolis, San Francisco, Seattle. Atlanta/Georgia has not. And so when you look at a map of our system versus, say, Dallas, which has laid more than 100 miles of new rail, and we have not done so, you realize that we're actually we're not in the strongest position as other cities are to move their populations around.
And Fred, if the MARTA piece of the referendum, if it passes, how much will it raise?
Sure. It's projected that in 2016 dollars, over the course of the tax, we'll raise about $2.5 billion for transportation infrastructure, MARTA enhancement and expansion.
And then if this passes, when will revenue collections begin, and when will the actual projects begin?
Absolutely. So the vote is on November 8th, and if it passes, about 90 days afterwards, so the early part of 2017, you'll see the revenue collections begin. And then in the early middle part of the spring, you'll actually see the first projects begin.
And you mentioned a few of the projects. Can you go into a little bit more about some of the proposed projects?
Absolutely. One of the first things that MARTA proposes to do, will actually be able to do, is to increase bus service. We're looking at rapid or express service across the city going north to south. And we're also looking at opening up or increasing the frequency of service during off-peak hours. So again, so that if you are traveling from the airport or just really trying to move throughout the city during non-traditional or off-peak hours, you'll be able to do so and have more options.
And finally, Fred, I know you mentioned that you have a website. We'll get that information up. But tell us, what is the difference between expansion and enhancement?
Absolutely. So expansion speaks to adding more services, adding more routes, restoring routes, and working on the connectivity. Enhancement deals more with improving the system that we already have in place. If you ride MARTA now, you'll notice on the cars and on the buses you have security cameras. And so we want to continue to work to continue improving the safety experience of the riders, as well as improving the quality of our systems and our trains and our buses that we already have on the roads and on the tracks today.
Well, I think our viewers have a better understanding. Fred Hicks with more MARTA, thank you for clearing up some of the questions about the MARTA referendum, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
And when we come back, we'll talk about the amendment that penalizes sexual exploitation and funds services for human trafficking victims. Stay with us, everybody. We're talking today about a number of the amendments and referendums on the November 8th ballot, and we turn our attention now to Amendment 2, which authorizes penalties for sexual exploitation and assessments on adult entertainment to fund child victims services. It's also known as the Safe Harbor Act. Now, Fulton County has been on the front lines of getting this bill drafted through its juvenile court partnership with the organization called Youth Spark. Jennifer Swain is the deputy director of the program. Jennifer, welcome back to Talk Fulton.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, so let's talk to our viewers as if they have never ever heard this, and let's explain to them what is Safe Harbor and what exactly the Amendment 2 does for our youth.
Well, let me first explain Safe Harbor. Safe Harbor was a law that passed last year through the legislature, and what it specifically said is that any child under the age of 18 cannot be treated as a criminal and cannot be charged with prostitution and locked up and treated as a criminal when we know that the commercial sexual exploitation of a child is a reportable form of child abuse. Once that Safe Harbor law was passed, we quickly recognized that there's a need for funding to be able to rehabilitate the youth that are recovered. And so what Safe Harbor, what Amendment 2 will do is create a dedicated fund so that services are available for young people who have been victims of commercial sexual exploitation.
And talking about this fund, we have heard a lot about safe houses and therapy, but those are not the only main cause for serving victims, right?
Thank you so much for saying that, because I think when most people learn about the issue, they know that, hey, the kid needs a safe place. And a lot of times that is the main service, especially when law enforcement, and let me tell you, we have some of the most dedicated law enforcement officers across the country that are working right here in our county, working right here in our state. But when they recover a juvenile in a sex trafficking sting, a human trafficking ring, yes, they need rehabilitation and they need a safe house right then and there. That alone can cost up to $5,600 a month, and that is through our Safe House partners. Outside of therapy, outside of the room, board, and watchful oversight costs that victims have to have every day, there are so many other ways that we're identifying victims, and they have a myriad of needs. It's not just about healing that child from the traumatic realizations and realities of trafficking. It's about making sure that that child can grow to live a healthy life, and there needs to be much more services from that, including child care services, job training, education. It goes across the gamut.
And you mentioned a little bit about the cost just now, and I think you said about $5,400 to serve our youth. But let's dig deeper, Jen. How much can it actually cost, including that and other expenses?
Well, let me just give you a real life story. I mean, I think let's just talk plainly about what the problem is. I've been at Youth Spark since 2008. I carry with me, as I educate people on this amendment, I carry with me the story of a young girl that I worked with who actually worked in a strip club. She was 16 years old. Yes, that child needed therapy. Yes, that family needed rehabilitation. But there were so many other things. If I could truly put a dollar amount on the amount of money it costs for my staff to just manage that child's case. Let's talk about what case management costs. Right. I know for a lot of organizations, you have to pay the salaries of the social workers, the program coordinators, those people who are actually on the front line. But when you really try to look at what that child needs, it's so much more than that. This child needed help getting IDs. This child needed help getting back in school. We had to order birth certificates for some of our clients. There's so many different things that they may need. And again, when they are walking through this journey, if they have not had the education and the ability to dream about their future, we need to train them so that they can see past beyond where they are right now.
Right, and all of that has a cost. Now, how have we, meaning the community, been covering the cost of services for exploited youth before this amendment?
Well, I think this is a great question, because if a child is recovered or identified as a trafficking victim and they are involved in the Department of Family and Children's Services, DFACS has dedicated money, and it can cost them around $181 a day just to house that child. But you have dedicated nonprofits such as Youth Spark, Georgia Cares, and others out here that are really working on the ground to help young people get ready for the services. And when I say get ready for the services is when victims are identified, a lot of the times, Shania, they are terrified. They don't want to talk to law enforcement. They've been programmed not to trust service providers. They've been programmed that the thing that they can do most is run away. But it takes a lot of time and a lot of energy in order to get that child ready to receive these services. And yes, what we do is we do our individual fundraising. But no matter if you are found in Fulton County, where we have the Youth Sparks, where we have the Georgia Cares, where we have United Way of Greater Atlanta, if you're found in Rome, Georgia, if you're found down in the coast, you should have be afforded the same, ability to get the funds that you need to cover all of the costs. And so that is exactly what Amendment 2 will do. It will create a dedicated fund that will make sure that nonprofits throughout the state of Georgia can access that when they have young people, victims of trafficking, that need the help.
And Jennifer, on its face, when you hear about the amendment, it sounds like, because you're trying to help children, it sounds like a really a positive thing. But why is there opposition from certain businesses, such as adult entertainment venues? Do they just not care about this particular issue, or what do you think it is?
Well, I don't think that anybody can hear the stories or realize or know someone who's gone through this and just not care. I don't think that's what it is. But I want people to realize this is not a tax upon that. This is basically what we're saying, an industry should accept responsibility, as we all have done as taxpayers, as nonprofits. You can accept and be a part of a solution for this. People may think this is unfair because we don't have children in our entertainment businesses. We don't have children in our clubs. But I can tell you this, I know personally from working with them, I've seen young girls who've had the ability, who have been in clubs. I've seen young girls who have had to make this choice. I mean, when you talk about the adult entertainment industry, it perpetuates a lot of other behaviors. We have now groups that are gathering and having, underground strip parties. It's not just about that, but I would just say that if you are an industry that participates or promotes this and it happens, you should be willing to accept the cost. And I think that the fee that is imposed is a very small amount.
Now, we understand that Atlanta has some strong survivor leaders that serve as experts all across the nation on this particular issue. Where do they stand in terms of support of Amendment 2?
Well, I'm so glad that you asked me that, Shania, because I think it's very important for people to recognize that Georgia has a huge cadre of survivor leaders, women who have gone through this, young people who have come on the other side of this, and they really want to reach back now and help others. They see kids that worked in the club with them. We have survivors that have told stories about starting out at 16 years old in the club and being groomed for other areas of human trafficking right through there. And they absolutely support this. They recognize, they see how much money these businesses generate, and they basically say that this is a small drop in the bucket that can really help kids. Because again, when you think about the cost of just residential alone at $5,600 a month, the more we have law enforcement, the more we have juvenile courts, the more we have community organizations learning about this issue, the more we're going to recover victims. Youth Spark and Georgia Cares cannot cover just these costs alone. So I think that it's very important to say, as we raise a lot of awareness and we move forward, more victims are going to come out. But thank you for asking about them, because our survivors absolutely support Amendment 2.
And finally, I know that Youth Spark is not alone. You have a huge coalition of supporters from juvenile court to the DA's office to the chairman's office. You all have done a lot to get to this point and to get this issue on the ballot. But Jennifer, if it doesn't pass, what happens?
Well, I think I just honestly want to be positive. I don't want to think about it, because right now this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity where community members can stand up and say, we want to protect our children, we care about this issue, and we want to make sure that funds are available. But, I'm proud to be a part of an organization like Youth Spark, and I'm a proud part of the movement. I think we have some dedicated organizations, some new and some old, but we're going to continue to do exactly what we have done and work as hard as we can to ensure that every child who is identified. But one of the reasons why this is extremely important is that as we continue to raise awareness, as we continue to uncover ways and find out how to better reach our children when they are vulnerable, we need to make sure that we have more funds available. Passing the Safe Harbor Act last year was very momentous for us. We can no longer arrest children under the age of 18. They can no longer be treated as a prostitute, and we need to have the funding available to give them services.
Jennifer Swain, it is important work that you and the Youth Spark team, you all do. Thank you so much. We will be watching to see what happens with Amendment 2. Thanks for joining us, Jennifer.
Thank you for having me.
And when we return, one more look at the amendments and referendums on the November ballot. Stay with us, everybody. And finally, everyone, one more look at the wording on some of the amendments and referendums now on the ballot. Amendment 1 asks, shall the Constitution of Georgia be amended to allow the state to intervene in chronically failing public schools in order to improve student performance? Amendment 2 is a long question, but it asks, shall the Constitution of Georgia be amended to allow additional penalties for criminal cases in which a person is adjudged guilty of keeping a place of prostitution, pimping, pandering by compulsion, solicitation of sodomy, masturbation for hire, trafficking of persons for sexual servitude, or sexual exploitation of children, and to allow assessments on adult entertainment establishments to fund the Safe Harbor for Sexually Exploited Children Fund to pay for care and rehabilitative services for individuals in this state who have been or may be sexually exploited. Now, the question about the creation of the City of South Fulton asks, shall the act incorporating the City of South Fulton in Fulton County and granting the homestead exemptions described therein be approved? And finally, the Fulton County T-Splost referendum question asks, shall an additional 0.75% sales tax be collected in that part of Fulton County, Georgia, outside of the city of Atlanta for 5 years for the purpose of transportation improvements and congestion reduction? Now, remember, there are other transportation-related referendums on the ballot as well. So please visit the county's website and look for the sample ballot, or visit the Secretary of State's website to review the language before you go into the voting booth. Well, that does it for this edition of Talk Fulton. Special thanks to Fred Hicks and for Jennifer Swain, and a special thanks to you for watching. We invite you to email us to let us know what topics you'd like to see addressed right here on Talk Fulton. Email us at fgtv.feedback@fultoncountyga.gov. I'm Shania Chavis, and we will see you next time.